Welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am David Matheson, your guest host today, sitting in once again for the best host in Catholic radio, Cy Kellett. Cy will be back again tomorrow, but you have me today, and what a great day it is. It is the Monday after Pentecost. I don't know if you can feel it. I can feel it. I think it's the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, of course, on Pentecost coming down to the upper room, the apostles, and something else that today reminds us of, today in the calendar being the feast day of Mary, Mother of the Church, brought to us by Pope Francis. It's a reminder that Mary, our Blessed Mother, was also in the room with the apostles on Pentecost. And what a beautiful celebration that it is. With us today, we've got a couple great shows, a couple great hours for you during today's show. The first hour will be Trent Horn. Why are you pro-choice? Why are you pro-choice? So if you'd like to have that discussion with us, go ahead and give us a call, 888-318-7884. That is 888-31-TRUTH. Why are you pro-choice? We can load up the phone lines now. Our second hour, we are going to have a guest from Down Under, Monica Dumit, coming all the way from Australia. She is going to be talking about something called consent culture. Consent culture. We are going to give you a little more information about that as the first hour comes to an end. We'll prep you for the second hour. But in the meantime, we do have Trent Horn with us. Trent, how are you?
I'm doing well, David. Thank you for hosting, and thank you for having me.
Oh, glad to be here. Glad to be here. And now I can see you on the monitor. So what's going on in your world? I know there is one thing that I have on my list. You've got an upcoming group interactive webinar. Tell me about it.
That's right. So I'm going to be doing a small group webinar just for a select number of people on the subject persuasive pro-life, how to better engage others. So it's a nice small group interactive dynamic, and that's available. You can sign up for it along with all the other courses I'm offering, both with homeschool courses and college courses, and that will be available at trenthornclasses.com. Go there. It's the first course offering on the list, and you can check that out at trenthornclasses.com.
Great. Sounds good. Once again, 888-31-TRUTH, 888-318-7884. Why are you pro-choice? And Trent, in the life issues area, pro-choice, pro-life, there's some things going on. You mentioned it specifically as we were talking leading into the show about the Supreme Court agreeing to take up a case from the state of Mississippi regarding restrictions on abortion.
That's right. I believe that this is a case that was originally heard by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that the Supreme Court is now going to hear. I think the Fifth Circuit ruled against the state of Mississippi, which was attempting to ban elective abortions after the 15th week of pregnancy, somewhere in the middle of the second trimester. Currently, states are able to Roe versus Wade had a trimester system originally. First trimester, you couldn't regulate abortion at all, basically. Second trimester, you could regulate it to protect a woman's health. Third trimester, you could only outlaw abortion in cases, but you could outlaw it in the third trimester, but you had to allow an exception for a woman's health. But health was defined very broadly as anything that's physical, emotional, psychological, familial, or age-related, which is basically anything. That standard all got kind of thrown out with Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992. There, the court said viability is the dividing line. Before viability, you can restrict abortion. You just can't put an undue burden on a woman choosing to abort her child. After you can restrict it, you just have to leave that health exception. And what Mississippi wants to do is say, well, no, even prior to viability, we want to protect unborn children. In fact, the law that they are seeking is similar to many Western European nations. The United States of America is one of only 7 countries in the world, I think along with China and North Korea, that allows elective abortion up until birth. Now people say, well, you can ban it after, you can ban it after viability. No, you can always find a loophole. You can always, if there's a doctor willing to do it. And so I've heard some people, David, tell me third trimester abortion is not even legal. Really? Go to drhearn.com. I'm going to see if his website still pops up for me. Warren Hearn is an abortion provider in Boulder, Colorado. And yeah, there it is, drhearn.com, DRHERN, first, second, third trimester abortion. It's right there. Someone doesn't believe you, they're doing abortions in the third trimester in America. And it's for any of the reasons, even if a woman did not know she was pregnant until the third trimester, which happens, you can weasel a health exception out of that if an abortionist is willing to do it. And so it is something that states have been trying to, pro-life people have been trying to limit and protect unborn children, but pro-choice advocates disagree. So that's why on this show, if you are pro-choice, if you think abortion should be legal, and if you have different opinions on when or on what circumstances, feel free to call in. We would love to hear from you on that. Why are you pro-choice? That's what we want to talk about today, and promise to have a fair conversation.
Which Trent is very good at. And even if you believe there should be some restrictions on abortion, but you believe fundamentally that it is a right that should exist, we will love to have that conversation with you as well. So there's all different kinds of stripes of being pro-choice, and we are happy to have that charitable conversation. 888-318-7884. Again, that is 888-31-TRUTH. Trent, what else is happening in the pro-life area that comes to mind? It's certainly worth discussing as we have you on here today.
Well, I think what's important to discuss is always being able to equip people to talk about this issue in a gracious way. I have a seminar called Arguing Against Abortion that's available at our School of Apologetics. So if you want to take an entire course from me on how to talk about this issue, you can do that at schoolofapologetics.com. But I truly believe that we can have good conversations on this issue, and we need to, because this is an issue where you can't agree to disagree. It's an issue involving deep, committed issues about life and freedom and what it means to value human beings, and we have to be able to talk about that.
Yeah, and that's a great new addition to the School of Apologetics. The School of Apologetics continues to grow. It started out with Jimmy's initial course, Beginning Apologetics. Trent, I think your Moral Apologetics course was the second one available.
Yeah.
And as we continue to build it out, one of the things we're doing is with what I would call these mini courses, and that's kind of where your newest one falls.
Yeah, so it's a shorter course on called Arguing Against Abortion. I'll be back at the beginning of June to film another course actually on the issue of Mormonism. So School of Apologetics is growing a lot. I'm really happy to see where it's going. But I'm really excited for Evidence for Pro-Life to be able to equip people to talk about this issue like we do here on the radio. And so hopefully we'll get some good people to call in. We might even have someone who at least left a question off air. Hopefully we'll get to answer that here shortly.
Mm-hmm. Waiting for that one to come in. And then Trent, I know you're headed down to San Antonio here to have a gathering with some of our donors. Going down there tomorrow, I believe.
Oh yeah, I've been flying all over the place actually, which is nice here in Dallas. It's very central where I'm living now. If I want to just hop off to places and go around and meet our supporters, I'm always grateful to meet the different supporters, Catholic Answers we have all over the country, even all over the world. So maybe one day we'll get to travel around the world again and get to meet all our great supporters we have in Australia and the Philippines, in South America, Europe. One day we'll do something with you guys in person.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And just a little bit more on the small group webinar that Trent has coming up.
Yeah.
It is going to take place on Tuesday, June the 15th. So that's not too far out, about 3 weeks or so. 5:30 p.m. Pacific. That would be 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. And you can reserve your spot at shop.catholic.com. Again, a limited small group seminar, June 15th. That's a Tuesday, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, shop.catholic.com. Let's take a quick break. We'll have some questions after we get back. We've got one off the air, and we've got room for you to call in. Call us again at 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Why are you pro-choice? Let's talk about it.
Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Now, not only can you watch EWTN anywhere but anytime with EWTN On Demand. Get on-demand access to more than 12,000 EWTN programs, including live shows and specials, all in one place, all free. Just go to EWTN.com/on-demand. There's nothing to fill out, no memberships required, and no fees to pay. All you need is an internet connection, and you're good to go. EWTN On Demand. Fast, easy, and free.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am David Matheson, Director of Development here at Catholic Answers, sitting in for Cy Kellett. And our guest the first hour is Trent Horn, and our topic is, why are you pro-choice? As we're waiting for a couple of other calls to come in, Trent, we do have one from off the air. Nathan says, it feels like pro-life people are up against too much and are barely affecting change. The marches are good, prayer is good, of course, but how can we be encouraged as pro-life folks that we are actually getting anything done?
Well, I think we can look at statistics to show that abortions have been declining. I used to say in my talks there are 1.2 million abortions that are done every year, but now the demographics have changed and that number has dropped. There's still many abortions that are done, but we're seeing improvement there. We're seeing abortion facilities are closing, and so that's been very encouraging to be able to see all across the country from the presence of pro-life individuals who simply pray in front of them. Also, I think for you like Nathan, like, oh, we're not making any progress. To be honest, it's not a fair fight. We're going up against something that the basest of human instincts impels people towards. I mean, abortion advertises itself. People have that natural selfish instinct when they find themselves in a jam, and so they seek it out. We are trying to go against that, and then there has help to defend it in academia, in Hollywood, among the highest political offices in the land. Honestly, it is a success to me that the pro-life movement, it's a success to me, the issue of abortion has not disintegrated like we see on the issue of marriage. The vast majority of the country has accepted the morality of same-sex behavior and same-sex marriage, and it's something to celebrate. Abortion is still something people are squeamish about, and they don't want to celebrate it, and many people are against it. And it's easy to be against it in this culture. It's harder to be against things like so-called same-sex marriage. It's easier. It's not easy per se, but it's easier to be against abortion than against something like so-called same-sex marriage or homosexuality. So the fact that people have been fighting for abortion for 50 years and have not made the progress they have in some of these other areas is a testimony to the strength of the pro-life movement.
And it seems to me, Trent, that I think it is somewhat easy as a pro-life person to get a bit frustrated by some of the slow pace, right? But the small victories are also important, are they not?
They are. And that is something that we have to focus on and not be caught up in this desire, like, oh, we got to win. We got to we got to we got to get to the 100-yard line. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's going to take. It took hundreds of years to end the institution of slavery, for example. And there, the victims are born invisible and easier to empathize with than with the unborn.
Sure enough. And I think, as we consider our conversation here for the first hour, if you are pro-life but are engaging with pro-choice folks, maybe they're in your own family, maybe you meet some of them at church, wherever it might be, part of our job as apologists is to help you have these meaningful discussions with folks, in this case, who are pro-choice. So we're happy to help you with that, too. In fact, we've got a couple other calls from offline, Trent, that we can address as well. So Jennifer asks, how can a pro-life person answer when asked why abortion is still not okay in cases of rape or incest?
Well, I think what a pro-life advocate should ask is, all right, well, why? I love the expression, it's not okay. We're talking about something that, and this is important, that we have to get our vocabulary right here. We're talking about something that ends the life of an irreplaceable human being. Once this child has died, there will never be another child like this again, ever, irreplaceable. It's an act of violence that destroys this child in their most vulnerable moment. So it's more than it's not okay in the case of rape or incest. It is morally wrong, though we should have empathy and compassion for a woman who is a victim of violence and becomes pregnant through that sexual violence. But it doesn't justify committing further violence against the child. I think what you should ask is, well, here's my question. Why is abortion wrong in pregnancies that do not result from rape and incest? And I think people say, well, because it kills an innocent human being. Okay. Does it still do that in the case of rape or incest? Even if the woman was not responsible for the pregnancy taking place, the child still exists. And the question is, what do we do to care for that child?
Sure enough. So we've got during this open forum, we are asking, why are you pro-choice? But we're going to expand it out a little bit, and we're going to also say, if you are pro-life, what sort of difficulties might you be having in explaining the pro-life position to others who don't necessarily agree with you? Or are there some nuances in your pro-life position that you'd like to discuss? We're open to anything that has to do with the pro-life / pro-choice conversation. So certainly keep us in mind here. Trent, also do want to mention that anybody who does say they are pro-choice, if you're pro-choice and want to talk to us, we will move you to the top of the line. Trent, where do you think, so here we have this, the Supreme Court agreeing to hear this case involving the Mississippi law. There are other laws as well, and in fact, I think, didn't Texas just pass a heartbeat law?
Yeah,
Didn't
Texas
the governor just
passed
sign
a
one?
much more. Yeah, Texas just passed a much more sweeping law, the heartbeat bill, that would ban abortion after 6 weeks. If that were enacted into law, the vast majority of abortions would be illegal. Many people find out they're pregnant even after this point. So I think that is, that would be a major victory for the rights of the unborn if a law like that were to be passed. I will be honest with you, David, I'm not a very optimistic person in general. So I don't know what's going to happen. The Supreme Court will hear this case. There's a wide variety of things that could happen. It could completely uphold Roe versus Wade and just say, sorry, it's the law of the land. You can't do anything about it. The court could make a very, very narrow ruling that only applies to a Mississippi law and not to any other case at all, though I don't know if they would do that. Or they could say that Roe has to be looked at in a different light and states are free to pass abortion bans at various stages. It could draw the line very early. It could draw it later. We don't know. It's going to be something to keep an eye out for.
Sure enough. And I think it's as pro-life people, I think we have to look at the fact that the Supreme Court is looking at these cases from a positive light.
Oh, yeah, they could choose to not hear the case.
Absolutely.
And send it back to the lower court. And so that shows that some of the justices at least see merit in the argument, something worth considering to bring it before the 9 justices. And I will tell you this, so David, I'll be concerned if the court does restore legal protection to the unborn. That may not be, because if it did that, if it overturned Roe, it would return the issue back to the states. But it is possible, because our president is firmly committed to keeping abortion legal, may work with the Senate, the majority of whom want to keep abortion legal, to pass a federal law, just codifying Roe versus Wade into federal law. That'll be another fight. That if Roe versus Wade were overturned, I am certain that is the next step that they would take, and then there would be quite the effort on Capitol Hill over that.
Right, because the right, so-called right to abortion, as it stands right now, is by and large only based on legal precedent, not actual, as you said, federal legislation that's been passed.
Right. It's simply because Roe versus Wade prohibits states from outlawing abortion. There isn't a positive right to abortion in the Constitution or in federal law or anything like that.
Right. Why don't we go to the phones? We've got a call here from Grace in Cincinnati, Ohio. Grace, your call for Trent Horn.
Hi, Trent. My
Howdy.
question was, I'm approached with a friend who often says that limiting a woman's right. I'm pro-life. She's pro-choice. She limits our rights now. In the future, that will give the government more power over our bodies now if they say we can't get an abortion. How do I kind of combat that?
Well, I guess, Grace, maybe you could ask your friend, all right, well, what are you worried that the government will do if, like you say that, what are you worried that if the government says it should be illegal to kill a child before he is born, I would ask, what slippery slope will that lead to? Because that seems like a very sensible thing. A lot of times, when we just phrase it as ban abortion, people think, well, they're going to ban abortion, they're going to ban something else. They'll ban this, they'll ban that. If they take away abortion, what else are they going to take away? I don't think we should look at abortion legislation as taking away things, but as restoring legal protection. So I would say, if we restore the legal protection unborn children once had from acts of violence that would take their life, what bad thing could come from that? What other thing are they going to do? Shouldn't we always be seeking to expand rights and freedoms in the human community rather than subtracting them? That might be one approach that I would take with this. And ultimately, with your friend, you have to say, you and I agree, government should not oppress innocent people. So then the question stands, are unborn children innocent people that these laws oppress by legally allowing other people to end their lives? That's what we have to always take the conversation back to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very helpful.
Okay, good. Well, I hope that's helpful for you, and I'm very glad that you called in.
Yeah, thank you.
All righty.
And Trent, that makes a lot of sense to me, and perhaps some of our callers, some of our listeners as well. The idea of being positive and hopeful in our messages rather than negative.
Right.
Because the pro-life cause, by and large, it very much is a positive case for human dignity, a positive case for life.
Right, and that's why we always have to stay away from the idea that, oh, we're trying to take away things. We're trying to take away this. We're trying to take away that. Or choice. They're taking away choice. If the word choice is what you're arguing about, pro-life is going to lose. Choice is a thing we all like. We all agree on. Even the word abortion, it's more touchy for people, but it's still an abstraction because most people have not. I've watched video recordings of actual abortions taking place. They're not pretty, as you can imagine. Most people have not seen that, an actual video of an actual abortion happening. So it's an abstraction for them. But other things that I would that I would say then is, if we focus not even from choice to abortion, but to the unborn. Should we restore legal protection that unborn children once had? Focusing on the child and the rights that he once had, I think is a productive place to take the conversation.
All right. Great. Let's go to Gary. Gary in St. Louis, Missouri, listening on 96.7 FM. Gary, your question for Trent Horn.
So my question for Trent is, the Republicans had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House at least 4 out of the last 12 years. I should have done a little more research on that. My question is why they didn't do something then, because my point is I think the Republicans used that abortion issue to get votes. But when they're in power, they still don't do anything about it.
Okay. What do you think they should do?
Well, what their constituents, the people that vote for them because of abortion rights or choice, that's why a lot of my friends vote for the Republicans. And so I don't understand why, once they get elected, why they don't do something about it.
Well, okay. So Gary, my question is, so you're assuming that all pro-life politicians. There are some Democrat pro-life politicians, but I think the majority would probably identify as Republican. But they haven't done, but they haven't done anything. My question is, how do you know that?
Well, because there's still abortions being performed every day, and even some in later terms.
But it's okay. But here's the problem, Gary. In order for a state, there are think about these bills, like the Mississippi bill to outlaw abortion and the Texas bill. Those were all pro-life politicians that got those bills passed, right?
Yep. Hey, Gary, hang on for a second. We're at the bottom of the hour. We got a hard break coming up. Hang on. Trent is going to finish his answer to your question after we come back. 888-318-7884. 888-31-TRUTH. Back right after this.
We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
According to divine command, we should give God worship, but how do we know if we're doing it right? Is worship a form of self-help? To make me feel better? A form of social activism, or even a commodity? Or is it something that transcends all of those? In Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth, Father Jeff Kirby cuts through the misguided modern notions about God and religion and takes you back to the foundation for true worship, God's revelation about himself. From his first contact with his chosen people to the culmination of his revelation in Jesus Christ, God shows us what religion is supposed to be like and how to make the practice of it a lifelong virtue in our lives. Order your copy of Real Religion by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, surrendering the hurt.
Are you feeling hurt by someone in your life? We'll help you find healing.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for Cy Kellett today, and our first hour topic is pro-life open forum. Although if you are pro-choice and want to discuss that with us, we will put you to the top of the line, 888-318-7884. Coming up in hour two is Monica Dumit, all the way from Australia. She is going to be talking with us about consent culture. And just a quick note on that. If you are a parent, the consent culture, it does center around sexual relationships. So just want to give you a heads up on that for the second hour. If that is something that you want to be careful with your children, certainly do so. That will be the focus of hour two with Monica. We are in the middle of talking with Gary calling from St. Louis, 96.7 FM. Gary was talking about how while Democrats are generally pro-abortion, Republicans don't seem to have done anything in particular for life. And you had some more to say about that, Trent.
Yeah, so I guess what I would say to Gary is I believe pro-life politicians we have to look at pro-life politicians both at the state and the federal level. At the federal level, at the state level, I said, look, you have states like Mississippi and Texas who have passed pro-life bans on abortion that are now going to the Supreme Court. But the federal government, first, there are not enough votes to reach the majority needed to pass a constitutional amendment or anything like that to overturn Roe versus Wade. Even if the federal government passed something, you still have Roe. You have Roe versus Wade. They've introduced Sanctity of Life Acts, other things like that. But you have a problem at the Supreme Court. But now, given that pro-life politicians have been in office and have selected judges who understand the original meaning of the Constitution, we've seen a change. I'll give you an example of this. A few years ago, there was a case, NIFLA versus Becerra. It was a case about how, and this was happening when I was in California. In fact, this was, what was the year that this case was? It was 2018. The California state government demanded pregnancy resource centers advertise abortion services and compelling them against their free speech rights. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided 5-4 in favor of the pregnancy resource centers. But 4 of the justices would have allowed the state government to compel pregnancy resource centers to advertise for abortion. So even though we don't see the change right away, we have been seeing declining abortion rates. We've been seeing also not just in gains that are made, but in preventing those who are committed to legal abortion. In the past, 4 years, for keeping the Hyde Amendment intact that prevented federal funds from being used for abortion. We've been seeing a lot of gains. So I would recommend going the Susan B. Anthony list has a lot of information on this that you might find to be helpful. So I think that Catholics should support politicians that believe in defending the unborn, regardless of what party that politician belongs to. If that politician promotes the common good and defends the unborn, you should seriously consider supporting them. So I hope this was a good answer, and I'm grateful for Gary calling in.
Very good. Thank you, Gary, for calling in. We do appreciate that. Let's go to line 3. Steve calling us from Maine. Steve is watching and listening on YouTube Live. Steve, go ahead for Trent Horn.
Thank you. Good to see you, Trent. My question is on abortion, the Catechism, paragraph 2270. And that's where the Catholic Church says we must respect life from the moment of conception. And then I look down at the footnote. There are no footnotes, really, except CDF Donum Vitae 1,1. What is that?
Donum Vitae is a document from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, one of the highest teaching offices in the church, that discusses answers to various bioethical questions. The church's teaching on abortion would be this: the church does not have a definite teaching on when the soul enters the body, but it does have a teaching that human life ought to always be respected. And it recognizes, though it doesn't officially teach, it recognizes the scientific consensus around a human organism's life beginning from conception. So the church isn't in the business of everything it teaches. It doesn't endorse every scientific theory that exists, but it assumes the common scientific consensus that from conception there is a unique individual member of the human species. And so the church says in its documents, like the 1974 Declaration on Procured Abortion, Donum Vitae, the current Catechism, that human life, every human being ought to be protected. So there's not a footnote for the scientific truth, but the church doesn't always list citations for the scientific truths that it assumes within its moral and theological teachings.
Right, that would be hard to do. Yeah. So I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate you calling in today. Again, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We have a pro-life open forum today. However, if you are pro-choice and would like to discuss that with us, we would be happy to move you to the top of the line. Let's go to line 1 with Michael. Michael calling from New Jersey, listening on Sirius XM 130 EWTN. Michael, what's your question for Trent Horn?
Hi, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my wife and I have done pro-life work for 35 years, been arrested during Operation Rescue. We've watched all the political stuff for all these years. Early on, we were involved in it. So, my question is, we're trying to look at a different way of dealing with this. And why haven't we done something like, let's say we're calling it Christmas Means Life, where children have a normal Christmas, but a pro-life adult would say, don't give me a Christmas present this year. Give it to Jesus. Give it to a local crisis pregnancy center or options, so that the present's given to the baby and to the mom. That's where the present should go, not to me. It's Jesus' birthday, not mine. It should go to him, and that's where he is. He's in the unborn, and he's in the woman in a crisis pregnancy. So, and that would be a fundraiser, a major fundraiser for these groups that really need help right now. It would be an awareness builder. It would be a time to pray instead of shop. That we could pray against abortion. It would be a boycott. We'd be affecting the economy at Christmas to say we're not happy, with
Well, Michael, let me jump in here. Let me jump in. I would say that I think your suggestion is a good one, and that the vast majority of action that we should take to defend the unborn is going to be non-political in nature, unless you happen to be a politician. Only a very small minority of our work is political in nature, in the sense of donating to causes, writing letters to politicians, or voting. That's going to be a minority. Other ways that we can help is by direct supporting ministries that are dedicated to helping the unborn, like pregnancy resource centers. And I think if you have a fundraising idea for a pregnancy resource center, you should contact the resource center and say, would this be something that would help you? And they'd be happy to partner with you in that regard. Though I think the primary thing that we need to do is we need to change people's hearts and minds about the nature of the unborn and whether they are deserving of legal protection. We can provide material support to people in crisis pregnancies, but as long as people turn en masse to abortion and they don't believe the unborn are truly human, we'll still have always have a serious problem on our hands. So I think education, doing talks in high schools, doing outreach on college campuses, having those tough but gentle but firm conversations with our friends and family when the issue comes up in the news. When it comes up, I heard they're going to try to ban abortion. I can't believe that. To respond with questions like, well, why can't you believe it? What would be wrong with restoring legal protection that the unborn once had? So I think that we do have to focus. The majority of our work is going to be not political in nature, but politics is also important because Martin Luther King Jr. once said, laws may not change hearts, but they can restrain the heartless. And so and also law as a teacher. When abortion became legal, that taught many people there must not be anything wrong with this. And so by changing laws, you do change hearts because the law is a teacher in that regard. So I hope that was helpful, and I'm glad that you called in.
Michael, thanks for your suggestions and thanks for your work in the pro-life movement. We certainly appreciate that. We've got a break coming up, but before we do, just want to remind you have 1 week left to join hundreds of other on-fire Catholics in the 20 Answers Summer Reading Challenge. Here's how it works. We're offering the sampler of all 44 books in the 20 Answers series, a few of which have been written by our very own Trent Horn and other apologists, as well as friends of the apostolate. We're offering all 44 books in the series at 70% off the cover price. You heard that right, 70% off, and we're challenging you to finish them all 44, by the end of the summer. We're also going to give you free shipping in the continental U.S. if you order the 44 20 Answers books. So not only 70% off, you're also going to get them shipped to you for free. Go to shop.catholic.com, click on the 20 Answers Challenge banner. Again, that's shop.catholic.com, 20 Answers Summer Reading Challenge banner for more info. We'll be right back after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
I feel that God has been really doing a work in me in the last 5-10 years. I'm a convert to Catholicism, and I started to just really feel a passion to know more about the Catholic faith, and I started listening to Catholic radio all day. I'm not doing great things, but I'm doing small things with great love.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson here, sitting in for Cy Kellett. Our topic this hour is a pro-life open forum, but we're also asking, why are you pro-choice? So if you are pro-choice and would like to discuss that with us, give us a call and we'll put you right to the top of the line. The number to call is 888-31-TRUTH. That is 888-318-7884. Trent Horn is our guest this hour. Second hour, we're going to have Monica Dumit coming to us all the way from Australia, talking about consent culture, particularly in the realm of sexual relationships. Continuing with our Pro-Life Open Forum, we have a question, Trent, from Mike off air. Mike called in from Denver, Colorado, 10:60 a.m. His question was, how can we say aborting a baby is wrong when you said we don't know when the soul enters the body?
Sure. First, I would say, that agnosticism we have, we could say that it's wrong because it's grossly negligent. It'd be like if you and I went hunting in the woods and we separated from one another, and then I saw what I thought was a deer. Well, there's a little flicker of orange. I'm like, is that a flower, or is that Dave on the other side of that bush there hunting? If I was not sure, if I was legitimately, I'm not sure if it's my hunting partner or a deer, I should refrain from shooting. It would be wrong for me to take lethal action precisely because I don't know that this is not a human being that I'm about to destroy. So that would be one argument, that even if we don't know if this is a human being, to be greatly cautious about abortion. But number two, I would say that the fact that we do know that this is an individual human life, this is a growing human organism, and so we know this human organism will receive a soul at some point. We just don't know exactly when. And so that makes this human being very valuable. That has extreme value, unique, irreplaceable value, even if this human being does not have a soul yet, still taking the agnostic position. And so it would be an affront to the dignity of this biological human organism to destroy it before it is completed and receives its soul. It still has value. Finally, I would say that even though the church has not officially defined when ensoulment begins, what makes most sense theologically and rationally would be that ensoulment begins when the organism comes into existence. So the soul is just the principle of life. A soul is what makes a living body alive and not dead. The soul is the principle of life that makes something alive, not dead. So if the organism is growing and developing, what's animating it? What's allowing it to do that? Well, the soul would be doing that. Throughout church history, because the church fathers did not have the same knowledge of biological facts like we do, they mistakenly believed that human in the womb, you were like a vegetative kind of life, then an animal kind of life, and then finally you had a body that could receive a rational soul. But as the Catholic bioethicist William May says, if Thomas Aquinas knew about DNA, and so DNA is the formal cause of our development, it is what guides our developmental process, then he would not hesitate to say that our soul comes into our body when our rational body begins to exist, which is at conception, which is something that any biologist worth his salt will be able to tell you. So I think that's like kind of the threefold path I would take to answering that question.
Very good. Mike, I hope that was helpful. Thanks for calling in today and leaving us with your question. Let's go to line one. Chase calling from Northern Kentucky, 740 a.m. Sacred Heart Radio. Chase, what's your question today?
Hi, Trent. Big fan. I read your Why We're Catholic, and I loved it. I just started answering atheism. But my question today is that I'm a public school teacher, and I have to teach about sexual education. And I realize that the majority of teachers around me are pro-choice, and I'm kind of in the minority. And I didn't know if you had any tips for like how to be like pro-life when there's like so much pro-choice around me in public schools. Thank you.
Yes, it's hard, and you also are constrained legally by what you can say and do as a public school teacher, even though many of your colleagues probably violate those constraints as well by letting their own biases slip out and things like that. A few thoughts. Well, first, Chase, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hello? Okay. How much latitude do you have in teaching? Do you have to just follow to the letter what you're given, or can you kind of come up with stuff?
I got some pretty good free leeway on what I can teach, just depending on so that I'm a first year teacher, so going off a little
Here's
bit.
Here's what I would recommend. Then if you're having to teach on human sexuality, first you could say, well, okay, we're going to talk about human sexuality. Let's talk about human biology. And so let's talk about how our development, the sexual act, and then what are the consequences of the sexual act, and show vivid images and ultrasounds of developing children in the womb. There is a website. Let me see if I can find it. I think it was, it's the Endowment for Human Development. Okay. Go to the Endowment for Human Development, ehd.org, Endowment for Human Development, and show the students to say, all right, let's talk about, sex and the sperm and egg come together. That results in a new human being. And you can cite biology textbooks to say, okay, this is a new human that comes into existence, and then show these videos and animations from the Endowment for Human Development about how life develops in the womb. And then if you get supervisors or teachers saying, that's just a bunch of pro-life stuff, you could say, well, I'm sorry, I'm just giving them all the facts about human development. Isn't that what I'm supposed to be doing as a teacher? To talk about here's how human development exists in sexuality in the womb. So that would be one approach that I would take. Another thing you can do is that if you have a section on, let's say we're going to talk about abortion, you can read descriptions of abortion, say, okay, so what is abortion? And actually, we're going to send you, stay on the line. Well, Steve, I hope you're still there. Stay on the line. You're still there, Steve. Stay on the line. I want to get your email. I want to send you my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, because you could read to them, say, well, what's abortion? Read to them excerpts from the Supreme Court and from departments of health, because that way it's not you smuggling a pro-life website into the classroom. It's, hey, I'm reading what the Supreme Court says what abortion is, and it's pretty nasty. But hey, I'm just reading what our Supreme Court says. I'm a public school teacher. What's wrong with that? You can also, I've had other public school teachers have done this with me. You can say, we're going to do a day on abortion. We're going to do 2 days on abortion. We're going to invite a pro-life speaker on the first day and a pro-choice speaker on the second day. Well, actually, I would reverse that. Do the pro-choice speaker on the first day, and then the pro-life speaker mops up everything on the second day. And in doing that, and, Planned Parenthood will probably send somebody to say, why should abortion be legal? And their arguments are so weak. If you get a solid pro-life person from your diocese or state right to life group, it can make an impact. And because you invited both sides, people can't get mad at you. Like, why'd you bring a pro-life speaker to your class? Like, well, I had a pro-choice speaker the day before. Like, shouldn't we have balance? So if you go with that kind of approach, I think you can make a real difference in the public school classroom. Does all that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Chase,
right,
thank you. We appreciate that. Yeah, we appreciate it. Stay on the line, and Marie will get your information, and we'll send you that book by Trent Horn, Persuasive Pro-Life. We got a couple callers on the line. We're going to try to get to both of you before the end of this hour of the show. Let's go to Marion in Lindsay, Nebraska. Marion's listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Marion, you're up next for Trent Horn.
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Thanks for your show. My question was, when Roe versus Wade court decision was written up, was there a clause in there that said if it was ever proven that life began at conception, it would be void?
Right. Let me just see here. I do remember this in Roe versus Wade. What Justice Blackmun said was about whether the fetus is a person, and Roe versus Wade did not decide on that. It had a very famous passage saying nobody knows when life begins, basically, which is silly because if nobody knows when life begins, you can never try anyone for murder, because you could say, the guy I killed, you don't even know he was alive because you don't know when life begins. We do. The court has picked birth, basically, de facto. But in Roe, it says, if this suggestion of personhood is established, the appellant's case, of course, collapses, for the fetus's right to life would then be guaranteed specifically by the amendment. And I believe he's referring to the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection for all persons. So yeah, it's possible the Supreme Court could say the unborn child is a person, and so it gets legal protection across the board. That is a possibility, I would say, albeit very, very, very remote. The court would be more likely to say that the right to abortion does not actually exist in the Constitution, and so states cannot be prohibited from carrying out a legitimate interest in protecting the unborn. So that would be something I would consider. In my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, I have a whole chapter that deals with abortion, the facts, the law, Constitution behind it. You can definitely check that out if you're interested. But thank you very much for calling in, and I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Marion. We appreciate you calling in from Lindsay, Nebraska. We're going to go quickly to Paul on line 5. Paul calling from Worcester, Mass. Emmanuel Radio. Paul, what's your question for Trent Horn?
I'll try to make it brief, but I may not be able to. I'm sorry. I listen to your radio, different programs on your station. It's great. I just want to say I'm 78 years old. My brother is 88. We take care of each other. I'm pro-life. Yeah. I'm Catholic. We do have the priest coming in. We're cut off from pretty much. Neither one of us has a license. We're getting our, enough food and things like that, medical treatment. We can, we do have means of doing certain things, but we haven't been able to get to the church. Now, I'm worried about euthanasia, of course. At my age, I've been worried for all my life. And I used to write letters in the 80s to the Worcester Telegram against abortion, euthanasia, and et cetera. And I just want to know, it seems to me that the church is moving much too slowly on, don't get me wrong, on euthanasia. I know that the church doesn't.
No, Paul, I agree with you. I agree.
I'm thinking about like the activism. I don't know if it would do any good. It has to do with, of course, with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit has to be there at all times in order to have whatever.
Well, Paul, here, let me jump in because we're running to the end of the show here. I agree that physician-assisted suicide is legal in a handful of states, and it's spreading to states. So it's not an epidemic like abortion yet, but we are getting there. And so Catholics have to be equipped to be able to do that. A good resource I would recommend is the National Catholic Bioethics Center. My friend Stephanie Gray actually she just wrote a book. I want to recommend it. Okay, it's called Start With What? 10 Principles for Thinking About Assisted Suicide. So my friend Stephanie Gray Connors is a pro at talking about abortion, and she wrote a great book on assisted suicide Catholics need to read. Everybody needs to read, frankly. Start With What? 10 Principles for Thinking About Assisted Suicide. So we need to educate ourselves and lobby state governments to prevent assisted suicide laws from being passed. And then, Paul, for you and your brother, I would recommend, as you are nearing the end of your life, make sure you have an advanced medical directive. Make sure you have in writing designated a healthcare proxy, making sure that you are treated in a way in accord with your dignity as a human person. Get an advanced medical directive. You can get those at the National Catholic Bioethics Center. If you just search, Google Advanced Medical Directive NCBC, Advanced Medical Directive NCBC, you can download a copy and have that to protect your wishes. But thanks for calling in.
Very good. Thank you, Paul from Worcester, Mass. We appreciate it, and we appreciate having you, Trent, for this hour pro-life open forum. As always, great work, great resources for everyone who called in. And we'll be seeing you here in San Diego before too long.
All right. That sounds great.
All right. Coming up on the second hour, Monica Dumit coming to us from Australia, talking about the consent culture. How important is consent when it comes to sexual relationships, and is consent the be-all and end-all, and how does that figure into Catholic teaching? 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Talk to you on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in Cy Kellett's chair. Cy should be back tomorrow, but I am happy to be here with you today. My regular job is Director of Development here at Catholic Answers, which means I try to help keep the lights on. My team and I raise the money here at Catholic Answers, so you'll hear from us during Radio Drive. We also are involved with events here at Catholic Answers. So if you haven't heard yet, the Catholic Answers Conference is back. You can go to CatholicAnswersConference.com and get more information. As always, it is the last weekend in September. We would love to see you there. But I'm happy to be here on Catholic Answers Live again, sitting in for Cy Kellett today. We've had a great show so far. First hour was Trent Horn and a pro-life open forum. Our second hour, we are bringing all the way from down under, all the way from Australia, Monica Dumit, a friend of the apostolate here at Catholic Answers. Monica is the Director of Public Affairs and Engagement for the Archdiocese of Sydney. You can find her work at the Catholic Weekly. Monica, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. You bet.
I should say.
Well, I know Cy was disappointed he wouldn't be on the show today. I know the two of you know each other well. You've been on the show before. And I imagine when Cy was down in Australia a couple years ago, did you guys have a chance to connect then?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually
Awesome.
were part of the same panel, which was nice. I got to chat with all of the guys about pro-life issues, so it was lovely.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So our phone number to call, of course, is 888-318-7884. Again, that is 888-31-TRUTH. And our topic today is something a little different, something I don't know that we've discussed specifically here on Catholic Answers Live, but it is the problems with consent culture. Monica, what is consent culture? And why is it important now more than ever?
Well, I don't know what it's like in the States, but here in Australia, there's been increasing conversations about consent and particularly the need to educate children in school about consent and specifically sexual consent. It sort of all erupted here, if you like, when a student of a private school, a female student, started an online petition about consent, and sort of she was telling her own story of sexual assault at the hands of another student at a private all-boys school, and she was saying that there was this real problem with the way that these private school boys were treating the girls, and just the pressure on them to be sexually active early in their teens. And all of those types of things, and the petition itself was a bit of a lightning rod, and you just had all of these women, many of whom had long since graduated from school, telling their stories very similar to this young woman who told her story, all about saying the idea of the pressure placed on teenagers to be having sex, and so there was this idea that we should be educating them about what consent looks like, that we should say, we should be very clear that alcohol-induced or drug-induced sex or pressuring women into sending, nude selfies and all of those types of things shouldn't be part of the culture, that there should be free and full consent. And so there's been this real push in Australia to update the curriculum across the board to make sure that we were introducing concepts of consent earlier and earlier. So that's sort of the picture that it's here, that's happening here at the moment. And unfortunately, we saw sort of similar behaviour being reported even in our national parliament, and similar allegations there. And so there's been this I guess culture of consent and the need to push consent almost as a virtue in relationships. So I don't know if any of that resonates with the States or anything similar has been happening over there.
Well, I think certainly, I don't know about the aspect of teaching about consent in the schools, but certainly the other part about the idea of sexual advances, typically by men, on women who have not consented to those advances. We have seen it with politicians, obviously. We've heard about it with actors and directors. I don't know that it knows any real societal bounds per se. And of course, there was the large case involving Harvey Weinstein, which launched the entire Me Too movement, which was very much centered on consent. But one question I have for you, and you've obviously looked into this. So if it's between two consenting adults, so to speak, does that make it okay?
Well, see, that's the problem in it. It almost seems like consent is being pushed as the sole threshold for virtuous sexual activity. And so I think we have a real risk, particularly when it comes to Catholic schools, in adopting, we all need to be clear about consent, and nobody's arguing for a second that the kids shouldn't be taught about consent, but it's almost as if that's the only marker, and then everything that follows from a consensual sexual relationship is good. I think that's the problem that we fall into, so that we shouldn't just be teaching that as long as there's consent involved, then the sexual activity is okay. Because I think that there's a lot more. Obviously, there's a lot more of a richness to our teaching, and we risk in Catholic schooling in particular, but also in all schooling, making consent really the only virtue when it comes to sex and relationships. And I think that's a really dangerous message to be giving to young people.
Sure, and I wonder, without saying any of this is okay per se, are there mixed messages that are being sent? In terms of, you wrote a little about this in your piece on the Catholic Weekly. Are there mixed messages in the way, certainly since the sexual revolution, that sex has been portrayed as, for example, a recreational activity? But does that make it any different from any other recreational activity? And then are the messages mixed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the progressive devaluing of sex and sexual relationships over decades has put us into a situation where kids today aren't educated in the sacredness of sex, the importance of it. And so consent really does seem to be the only thing that, the only barrier that they need to cross. A colleague of mine at the Catholic Weekly, a guy named Ben Connolly, wonderful writer, was watching the Grammys in the US, and there was this live performance of a song that I won't mention on radio, particularly not Catholic radio, but sort of included a performance of, pole dancing, and the two singers ended up on stage writhing in a bed together, and all of these types of things. And it was celebrated as, a real moment of sexual empowerment live on television. And he commented that on the one hand, you're sending this message that something like that is sexually empowering. And then on the other hand, you're expecting young men and young women to understand and appreciate that sex isn't recreational. And so when you send mixed messages, how do you expect them to grow up with a proper understanding of the dignity of the human person, the need for, respect for the other and respect for self? And so I think as a culture, we've lost all of those messages, and they're not going to be fixed by consent education, and actually they might even be worsened.
Mm-hmm. And we'll dig more into this as we go along. We are reaching up toward our first break. Let me mention the number again, 888-318-7884. That is 888-31-TRUTH. We are talking about the problems with consent culture and how it relates specifically to sexual relationships. And we'll get into this a little more as the hour goes along. Monica just touched on it. Monica Dumit, our guest from Sydney, Australia. How does Catholic teaching figure into this? And is the world maybe coming around a bit, whether they know it or not, to what Catholics have been saying about sexual relationships all along? We're going to take a break. We'll be right back after this with more Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live. The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
The power of prayer depends on God's action, not on our praying. The Holy Spirit prays within us with groanings too deep for words, as Romans 8 says. And He empowers us to seek God and to seek from Him all that we need. And the answer to prayers are always from God in order to worship Him.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. If you don't recognize my voice, my name is David Matheson. I'm the development director here at Catholic Answers, and I'm sitting in for the great Cy Kellett. And our second hour, we're in the second hour of Catholic Answers Live. Our second hour conversation is with Monica Dumit, who's with the Archdiocese of Sydney, Australia, and we are talking about problems with consent culture. Before we get back to Monica, and we've got a couple calls on the line, we're going to get to Lil and Mike here momentarily. I do want to mention to you that if you have listened to this show, if you are an amateur apologist, if you have had conversations with non-Catholics, inevitably at some point the Crusades and the Inquisition are constantly brought up by non-Catholics attacking the church. If you want to know the real story, learn the truth today. Visit shop.catholic.com, download the free ebook, The Real Story of the Crusades and the Inquisition. The Real Story of the Crusades and the Inquisition. Get your copy today at shop.catholic.com. Just look for the button at the top of the page. Again, The Real Story of the Crusades and the Inquisition for our free ebook. All right, let's get to Monica. If you're ready for calls, we'll jump right into it.
Sure thing.
All righty. Let's go to Lil in Florida. Lil is listening on Sirius XM 130 EWTN. Lil, your question for Monica Dumit.
So I heard regarding girls feeling the pressure from boys and the whole issue with consent. But I also wonder, too, in our Catholic schools and also our Catholic girls and families, where's the teaching of modesty? Because it's very easy sometimes for us girls to say, well, I felt pressure with the boys. How about the other girls pressuring each other? And in Catholic school, this goes on. And you see these girls sharing their pictures because they want to outdo the other girl, right? So they send these pictures to these boys. And then they said they felt pressure. Well, it came from your phone. So how much pressure was that boy really giving you? Why are we not teaching modesty, too? Because we got to take a look at both sides. I think a lot of times we want to blame the other sex a lot. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen that way. But where's the modesty being taught in our Catholic schools?
Lil, I think that's a great question. Apologies, I was having a cough while you were talking, but look, that's true. I think we come up against a little bit of a problem here because anytime we start talking about modesty, we get accused of victim blaming or victim shaming. At least we do here in Australia. I'm not sure what it's like in the States, but very much anytime you start speaking about modesty, even about safe behaviors, like, maybe don't go out drinking to a point where you're not in control or you're not aware of your surroundings or things like that, we automatically get accused of victim blaming. And obviously the fault in all of these absolutely lies with the perpetrator, but we said that there is something to teaching everyone about safety, and whether that's safety in behavior, modesty in dress, and all of those types of things. There is a place for that. Absolutely not to excuse the actions of somebody else, but I want to say that when you lock your doors at night as a measure of safety. And that's not to say that if someone was to come into your house and break in unwanted and steal your stuff, that it's somehow your fault for not having enough locks on the doors or something like that. But there is an element that we teach ourselves, and we should be teaching our children about safety and about safe behaviours. And I don't think those two are contradictory. So I think you're absolutely right that there is an element to that, but it's just we do tread a fine line when speaking about modesty, because we are very much accused of victim blaming. Does that make sense? And I don't know if that's the case in the States as well. It definitely is the case here in Australia.
Lil, any other comments?
No, it does make sense. And don't get me wrong, I think modesty should be taught on both sides, right? Boys and girls, because, I mean, I try to teach mine. But my thing is that sometimes, too, and I get it, because there are situations, you're absolutely right, where there's pressure, but when a girl sends from her phone a picture and sends it off to one or two or three boys, we also have to look at that behavior, right? Because the boy didn't send it from the phone. And I think we have to teach modesty on both sides, right? Because look where we are today in our culture. It's sad. I think we need more modesty, both for women and men. Don't get me wrong. I think both sides need modesty.
Absolutely, and not simply just modesty in appearance, modesty in speech as well. Temperance, I think, too, in entertainment are some of the things that we fill our minds and our eyes with. There's a Baptist preacher who I listen to from time to time, and I remember him saying that our entertainment choices are either who we are or who we're aspiring to be. And so I think that there's also a bit of a point to looking and considering the entertainment choices of ourselves, of our children, because so much of this is fed to them through popular media. So I think modesty is one thing. Also language like dignity and respect, really, the fundamental dignity of the human person, which brings us all the way back, through Catholic teaching. Like Dave was saying before, I think people are starting to realize it, that the Catholics might have had it right all along, even if they're not ready to admit it. But I also appreciate it's a battle for parents, right? Like I don't have kids myself, but just the efforts that parents have to go to really to protect their children, and to raise them well in a society that's just telling them the complete opposite, just full respect. I know it's tough, and I love that we have sort of great apostolates that help parents to do that. But yeah, full respect for parents trying to do it in such a difficult environment.
Lil, thanks for calling in this afternoon. We appreciate it, all the way from Florida. Let's go to line one, Mike in Denver. Mike, your question for Monica Dumit.
Good afternoon, David. Thank you so much, first of all, for taking my call.
You bet.
I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller. And Monica, thank you so much for for being here today and your expertise. Monica, thank you. So I just had a comment and a question today. So when we talk about consent, a lot of times what we see in the popular culture, especially popular music, what the mainstream culture promotes is that sex is okay to do whenever you want to do it, but at least, according to the Bible, this is something that's supposed to be saved for marriage. And for younger people like, myself, I was 24, recently turned to 25 in March. Something, I personally struggled with growing up was pornography. And I went to Catholic school for a year in 5th grade, but when I went back to the public schools is when this came back into my life. And I think that the more we take God and Jesus out of the schools is when these things like sex and pornography have more of a possibility to take over young people's lives. But my question is, do you feel that it's possible, even possible, to regulate this without the Bible or Scripture being involved?
It's a good question. I think it's possible. I think that the natural law that's written on every human heart, there's something innate in us that wants commitment, that wants, monogamy, that wants to be treated well. And I think that maybe that's what we're starting to see in coming out, particularly in some of these schools. I was reading a devastating post from a woman who goes into schools around the country, faith-based schools and public schools, and she was saying just the stories that the girls tell her of how they feel treated and objectified quite brazenly in the classroom, by male members of their class, and that they know that they're not meant to be treated like that. Maybe they haven't heard the gospel preached. Maybe they don't know, that we've got generations of children coming through schools now whose parents never took them to church, who never shared the story of the Bible with them, but still they know that this isn't right, that still they know that fundamentally they deserve better than this. And so I do think that it's at least identifying the hunger and the need to be treated better is definitely possible, without immediately preaching Christ. But we know that the answer really and only fundamentally lies in faith, because without being able to say that humans are created in the image and likeness of God, that we are afforded a special dignity, that God becoming human is what elevates our humanity, without being able to say that, and with treating human beings just as another object, there's only a certain level that you can go to. So I think that you can identify the problem probably without faith, but I don't think you can come to a fulsome answer without a faith-based perspective, because knowing that we're all loved, born in love, created for love, really only does come from Scripture.
What do you think, Mike?
I absolutely agree. And, I do think, like I said, it all goes back to the more we remove Jesus and God from the schools, the more that, quite frankly, the devil has a stronghold on our younger people. And it certainly happened in my life. And thank you so much for your expertise, Monica and David, for letting me be a part of the program. It just means it's invaluable. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the call, Mike, and thank you for your honesty. I might just add one more thing. We can't also rely on the schools to do all of this. I think that we can fight to keep God in the schools, but there may be a point, and it's probably coming closer, where we're going to have to get creative. How do we spread this message in our parishes in other ways? Because as God is taken out of the schools, we need to step up our game and make sure that we're still being able to find many opportunities to pass on the faith to students, not only the ones who are in Mass on Sundays, but find and get creative in ways to do it. Like, having multimedia platforms like Catholic Answers.
Indeed. And Monica, I feel like you mentioned the consent education coming into the schools in Australia. I've got to believe it's, one way or another, it's not far behind here in America. I think a lot of parents are indeed waking up to just what is happening in the schools, what is being, I'll use the term, pushed onto their children. Their children are coming home and asking questions that many parents never thought they would hear out of the mouths of their children. But there is a waking up that's going on, I think, for parents, and it's reminding us all, hey, we are the primary educators. We've got to take this bull by the horns.
Yeah, absolutely, and take it seriously and be involved deeply in the education of your children. One of the things that we're seeing in Australia, I'm not sure if the same is happening in the US, but the way that it works is that the schools are supposed to inform parents in advance of anything to do with sex education. So the parents are supposed to know when it's being presented, what's being presented, and have the opportunity to withdraw their children from the class if they don't think that it's appropriate at that time. But what we see happening is that those who might want to get some more dangerous ideologies into the minds of the children are putting them in as anti-bullying programs or anti-discrimination programs or anti-violence programs, labeling them like that. Still very much pushing, the sexuality and gender education. But because they're not labeling it as sex education, because they're putting it under an umbrella of anti-bullying, then they end up being able to circumvent the parental consent and the parental notification. So that's happening here, and that's really dangerous. So you need to be involved not only in the religious education of your children, the sex education, but all aspects of it, because you don't know where these forces are coming in speaking to children. So that's one lesson from Australia, which I think in many ways we seem a few steps ahead or behind the US, whichever way you want to put it. The other thing I think is a real opportunity for Catholics is to create our own.
Yeah, we are, Monica, we are at the bottom of the hour. We are headed toward our hard break here. We will be back just after this. Again, consent culture, the problem with it, with Monica Dumit from the Diocese of Sydney, Australia. More to come right after this break.
This is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Thank you for listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and He desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of His will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, surrendering the hurt.
Are you feeling hurt by someone in your life? We'll help you find healing.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am David Matheson, your guest host today, sitting in for Cy Kellett, and we are in the midst of a great conversation with Monica Dumit from the Diocese of Sydney, Australia. We are talking about the problems with consent culture, specifically as it relates to the Me Too movement, to sexual relationships. And Monica, as we were talking during the break, there are folks in society who may have nothing to do with Catholic Church, may have nothing to do with religion, but they are making the point, and it plays right into the whole idea of consent being different when it comes to sexual relationships. They're making the point that sex is different. It's not despite what the sexual revolution told us and has continued to tell us, it's not just another recreational activity, and that's why consent is so important in that venue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was reading a really good piece by a woman named Dr. Emma Wood. It was featured on ABC Religion and Ethics, and the ABC is our national broadcaster here. For the most part, let's just say their worldview isn't exactly Catholic.
I can imagine.
Or anything close to it. So
yeah.
So it was really interesting to see this piece appear there, but Dr. Wood was talking about how you can't treat sex like a water fight or a game of tennis, and a culture that has done it for so long, that has denied the significance of sex, now finds itself in a real quandary because we're looking at it and trying to then enforce a notion of consent on particularly a younger generation who have no concept of its significance. And we really find ourselves at a crossroads. The consent education only lasts for so long, but you will only really change the culture and only really have the cultural change that we need if you start talking about the significance of sex and sexual activity and why it is not just recreational. And so it's a little bit like the prisoner's dilemma, right? So everybody's sitting there just going, well, we know that this is what we have to do, but are we willing to make those hard decisions as older Australians, as older people in generations in other parts of Western culture? Are we willing to sort of wind back a little bit of the sexual liberation movement that rolled through and say, well, after a couple of generations, we can see that it's actually causing some damage and causing some harm, and are we going to do something to redress that?
Very good. Let's go to our next caller. Jennifer is on line 1. Jennifer calling from Huntsville, Texas, watching and listening on YouTube Live. Jennifer, what's your question for Monica?
Hi, Monica. I was just wondering if you think consent culture will have a negative effect on, say, people, especially adults that are on the spectrum. So they have trouble understanding cues, so they might make someone uncomfortable, but accidentally, but that could cause, ramifications for them later. Would you see that happening and maybe affecting their relationships with others?
Sorry, so if I can just understand the question, so adults on the spectrum, would consent culture damage their relationships? It's hard to say. In some respects, you think that it might be of assistance because it's a very definite marker for them. If they're a little bit, if picking up non-verbal cues and those types of things are more difficult for people on the spectrum, that having a definitive marker could be helpful. I think in one respect, I'm not an expert in this area, so I don't want to profess to be, but I also think that they deserve the richer picture of sex and sexuality as well, and to be able to find ways to introduce that that fits in with their particular needs and ways of picking up information. So I think in some respects I actually think it might be helpful, but we can't stop there. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, kind of. It's just I knew some people kind of growing up, and they were on the spectrum, obviously, and very friendly, like wanted to hug and just be very personable. But I know with some people that might be too, like, invading space, kind of. But if they don't really know those cues, it would be hard for them to realize that.
So their natural affection and the way they express that affection could infringe on the idea of consent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think as you're talking, I'm thinking of a really wonderful young man who I've encountered in Catholic circles a number of times, who, like you said, wants to just give you a hug at every point, and hugs that go for about 30 or 40 seconds. And so I think that it's possible to be still introducing, maybe not consent in those types of terms, but we've been through fist pump, show them your love by fist pump, and so sort of trying to train them. Train sounds so terrible. Sorry, I didn't mean it to sound like that. But trying to help them find other ways of still expressing their affection that might not necessarily be so intimate. So yeah, dear Arthur, we've been doing a lot of fist pumping, and COVID's been quite helpful for that as well. The nice warm elbow greeting. But I think there's ways to do it. We just have to be patient, and still let them help them to find ways to express love and affection. but maybe not in a way that necessarily makes other people feel uncomfortable or even and sometimes unsafe.
Jennifer, thanks for calling in today. We appreciate that. And the lines, several lines are open for you. 888-318-7884. Again, 888-31-TRUTH. Monica, I can't remember if it was in your article or the other article that you sent, and you touched on this really briefly in passing a moment ago, the idea of a recreational activity like a water fight, and then the aspects of that translating into the sexual realm. I think it was you who gave an example of that. Talk about that, and maybe it'll help us frame the whole issue and why it's problematic, the way we've defined sexuality over the last 50, 60 years.
Okay, so this wasn't me. This was Dr. Wood, and so
there you go.
She began with a thought experiment, and she said, so say you've got two young people. There's you and Jack keeps saying, let's have a water fight, and you say, no, I don't want a water fight. And then when you're not looking, he throws a water bomb at you and splash, and you're completely wet. And so all of a sudden you're in the middle of a water fight. Yes, Jack was wrong to start the water fight, throw a water balloon at you when you said that you didn't want one. But the moral gravity of that action is, we would say, is quite low. It was annoying, it was inconvenient, you got wet, but there was no real lasting damage to starting a water fight. If it's a little bit difficult in those circumstances to talk about, well, no, that was a violation, that was something that was really, really harmful. So what he did was wrong, but not that wrong. We can't talk about sex in the same way. Replace now the water fight for sexual activity, and, Jack keeps asking and you keep saying no, and then all of a sudden he comes and forces himself on you anyway. Obviously, there's a much deeper gravity to that action. It's a much deeper moral wrong. The impact on you is a lot more long-lasting. And that's obvious to anybody in terms of the difference between a water fight and a sexual assault, right? Like it's not something that needs to be explained. But what Dr. Wood was saying is that for so long we've treated sex like a water fight. We say it's just another recreational activity, and so the gravity then of the consequences of forcing that unwanted activity on somebody else. There are so many of our young people who see that as something that's not necessarily that serious because they've been taught that sex isn't that serious. And that's just, in the culture, add pornography to that, and they're watching, often very violent images, and they're just available from, to kids even before they're teenagers. And this is the idea of sex and sexuality that they're being raised with. And that they're watching and internalizing, and so it's very, very hard for us then to start redressing that and talk about sex as something serious and not something that's just entertainment. So that's what Dr. Wood was saying, and all analogies fall down, and sometimes in making an analogy, you're bound to get people upset because you don't want to, on the one hand, compare something as serious as sexual assault with an unwanted water fight, even for illustrative purposes. So I apologize if that upsets anybody. Absolutely not my intention, but the point, I think, is well made, which is we know this is more than a recreational activity. We should treat it like that, and we do ourselves a detriment, and we do future generations a detriment if we don't.
Well, and I think to your point, this is not what you're saying. It's not what Catholic Answers is saying. It's not what the Catholic Church certainly is saying. But it ends up, unfortunately, and this is where the mixed messages, come in for some young people in particular, especially I think for some young men, is the response ends up being, but I thought it was just like they're the ones saying, I thought it was just like a water fight. I thought this was just all in fun. Nobody got hurt, blah, blah, et cetera. And that's the quandary that you were talking about earlier.
And the damage is real and
Yes.
and really lasting. And I don't know how we make that real to men and women, but particularly to young men, about actually how grave this is, about how harmful, about how much of a violation it is. We also do ourselves a little bit of a disservice, I think, in suggesting that the only reason that it's a violation is because of sort of a possible pregnancy or a possible STD or something like that. That there's something about, even if pregnancy is avoided, even if a sexually transmitted disease is avoided, that there's still a harm that comes that's deep and lasting. And so I think that that's something we really need to start educating. But again, we can't do it without talking about the significance of sex, the importance of treating others with human dignity, which I think is a great opportunity for the church as well. You were saying before that the consent education in schools isn't really a thing yet in the United States, but it could be coming. And so if I was giving advice, I would say start now. Let's start packaging up consent education that doesn't just focus on yes or no, but actually goes more broadly into the richness of human sexuality, into the need to treat other people with dignity. I think that if we were, if we were smart and organised, that we would be doing this because the church has something so rich and so beautiful to offer, not just those in Catholic schools, but those in public schools and everywhere. And so I think this is a real opportunity for us to be forming people in that way. Not necessarily as a means of evangelization, although that's always good, but really just out of service to humanity, out of a desire for the common good, for all people to be treated with dignity and respect.
No doubt about it. We are having a great conversation with Monica Dumit on consent culture and how it figures into sexual relationships and how the church figures into this whole conversation. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
This is Steve Liegers, president of Tri-State Catholic Radio, and I am a sinner. A sinner who needs God's grace and mercy, especially when I'm weak or disappointed in myself or have hurt others. Catholic Radio and its wonderful variety of programming reminds me that God loves me and uses radio as a medium to broadcast His love and encouragement into our world. Find a Catholic station in your area and tune in.
The world needs EWTN Catholic Radio, now more than ever.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for Cy Kellett today. We are wrapping up 2 hours of great Catholic radio here with a conversation with Monica Dumit from the Archdiocese of Sydney, Australia, coming to us all the way from Sydney. And the conversation we're having is about consent culture, its relationship specifically within sexual relationships, and where does the Catholic Church figure into all of this? Monica, in your role or within the Archdiocese of Sydney, what sort of efforts do you see there, either to support the positive aspects of this issue or other related issues, or maybe to counteract the more negative aspects in terms of educating young people in particular about sexual relationships?
Well, one of the great things that we've seen grow in the last few years, and I actually think it's a model that's been adopted from the United States. One of the great groups we've got here is the Culture Project, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's very much a peer-to-peer ministry, where young people not long out of school themselves are going back into schools to talk about authentic relationships, about real love, the dignity of the human person, and those types of things. And it's received quite well, because these people just a few years older than them, talking to them about the needs and the desires of their hearts. I think one of the activities they do sort of asks the young people there, what would an ideal relationship look like? And they start putting it up on the whiteboard, and all of a sudden you get faithful, you get loving, somebody who treats you with respect, who's committed to you, all of those types of things. And without necessarily coming in and preaching the church's teaching on marriage and on sex and sexuality, you get the young people from their own selves and from their own experience articulating exactly what the church is offering. And I think that that's really enlightening for them. And so that's one of the great ministries we've got. It's run by some wonderful young people who take a mission year or a couple of years of mission to do this in schools. And I think that young people witnessing to young people is a really important aspect of this. There's only so much that students will receive from their teachers, from priests, from directors of public affairs or things like that, people with official roles, or from their parents. So it's really beautiful to see the witness of young people. Mike, who called before, was talking about struggles with pornography and things like that, and I think that also a witness to the dangers of pornography and the impact that can have on a young person's life, coming from a young person themselves, is also something that's absolutely crucial. So we're seeing some of that. I'd love to see the ministry grow and more ministries like it, because I think that having young people minister to young people is and witness to young people is really important, and that's how we're going to most effectively reach them.
Indeed. I just want to make a quick promo here. Your good friend Cy Kellett's written a book. Monica, have you read it yet?
I haven't.
Well, we need to make sure you have a copy of it if you don't have a copy yet. But I do want to pass along a review of the book from Andrew. Andrew sent us this review of Cy Kellett's new book, A Teacher of Strange Things. He said, Cy accessibly presents why billions of people through 2,000 years continue to encounter and ground their lives in Jesus Christ, the adventure and challenge of self-sacrificial love they are called to, and the dynamic communion with God and others that is both the beginning and the consequence of living as a follower of Jesus Christ. Andrew says this is a perfect book for anyone who has good faith questions about Jesus and is trying to sort out where she or he will stand in relation to him. So Father's Day is coming up. If you're still looking for the perfect gift, if you have a father, a grandfather, adult son, a husband, this would be the perfect book for them. Teacher of Strange Things by our very own Cy Kellett. You can save 25% off that book right now at shop.catholic.com. Just use promo code TEACHME, T-E-A-C-H-M-E, Teach Me at checkout, shop.catholic.com. Teacher of Strange Things by our very own Cy Kellett. Monica, continuing our conversation here, talk about, so you were just discussing what a great witness, peer-to-peer witnessing is, and isn't that true for any of us? If men want to connect greater with their Catholic faith, for example, they're going to receive it better from another man, a woman often from another woman, a mom from a mom, and certainly in this case, a young person who has had to deal with all of these. I'm 50 years old, and the things that young people have to deal with today, it's got to be overwhelming. So the more tools that folks like you at the Archdiocese of Sydney, we here at Catholic Answers can provide young people, especially equipping them to be able to witness to their peers, I think we can't do too much of that.
Absolutely right. I think one of the great witnesses that young people can bring to is the joy that comes with really understanding and accepting the church's teaching on the human person and on sexuality. One of the really unfortunate things about such a sexualized culture is, it seemed the young people are just being overwhelmed in the one sense, with all of this material and all of this sexualized content, but by the same token, it's giving them an impoverished view of sex and also of themselves. It's such a narrow and awful view, I think, of the human person. So I think one of the great benefits of peer-to-peer ministry, and for those who have the courage and the ability to be speaking about these types of issues publicly, is that the joy with which they often speak about discovering these teachings, about living these teachings, about how much it has enriched their lives, not only in terms of relationships with each other, but their relationship with themselves. One of, I think, the most toxic things about the culture, the sexualized culture, is that we convince, young men, young women themselves that they're only objects, and that love is something almost beyond their reach, and to be loved and to be loved unconditionally. And so I think the church's teaching on that is just so beautiful and would provide such a cure for so many of these current social ills. And it's really devastating. They always say that the devil just twists it a little bit, right? So he
sometimes that's all it takes, right? That's all it takes. Yeah.
And but just the havoc that it's wreaked. So I think that one of the great things that we have to offer is the joy and the peace that these types of that this teaching provides. And you see it just in the faces of these wonderful young people who are going into schools and who are doing great things online as well.
Yeah. Monica, in the last couple of minutes that we have here before we head out for the day, what quick advice would you give to a young person who sees the value in this and wants to be part of that solution and wants to witness to their peers on everything from the beauty of Catholic teaching to the importance of sexual relationships compared to other things in our lives?
Great. Well, the first thing I would say is find people to do it with. So find a community, find friends. It's hard to do it with other people. It's near impossible to be trying to do that alone. So find some friends who are there to support you, to work with you, to keep you accountable. Often these conversations, I would say, don't need to happen online. They're much better in person. We can all get trapped into being a bit of keyboard warriors and thinking that we'll convince somebody in the chat stream. It's often never the case. Don't be discouraged when, at times that it doesn't go well. You never know the seeds that you plant in somebody's life. Even if they might not bear fruit for years to come, they might come back and remember, send your guardian angel before you in every conversation. My guardian angel gets a lot at quite a long workout. I always send them before me in a conversation. I had a beautiful nun tell me that you can also pray to them and ask them to fix a conversation that you think you've messed up. That's probably my quick advice.
Yep. And I think your last point about a strong spiritual life, because I can promise you, if you go into this type of work, the devil's coming after you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Monica, thank you so much. We appreciate having you for this hour. It's been a great one. And God bless you guys down there in Sydney, Australia. And God bless you and your work, okay?
Thanks, Dave.
You bet.
Speak to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye. Open Forum with Tim Staples, first hour tomorrow. Father Anthony Dorsa, hour 2 tomorrow. Join us. Cy Kellett will be back on Catholic Answers Live for another 2 hours of apologetics and evangelization. God bless you. Have a great evening.